and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for the exciting start of a new series. Let me explain the plan. Welcome to Great British Road Journeys. In 1900, the first edition of the Michelin Guide was published. The guide offers suggestions on where to travel, what to see and where to stay, all with the intention of getting you out there and on the road exploring. In 1923, the UK's road network would see the introduction of road numbers, making it even easier for travellers to navigate the country, and of course there's a 1923 edition of the Michelin Guide to help you along the way. Which is what I've got here. Using a combination of this 100-year-old guidebook, old maps and general f***wittery, we'll be exploring the country at a time when motorways didn't exist. What's changed, what remains, and how were the roads laid out in the 1920s? I know what you're thinking, a middle-aged bloke with a dodgy fashion sense travelling the country using an old guidebook. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? No. I'll explain things a bit more as we go, but let's get started, and in today's episode our road journey takes us to the Norfolk coast, starting in Norwich. If you live in the United States, then Norfolk, whilst not geographically located in the south of England, is very much like your deep south. You know, banjos, rocking chairs on porches, incest and farmland. According to my guidebook, in 1923, Norwich's population was around 120,000, which adjusted for inflation is around 200,000 today. One of the things that it suggests we go and take a look at is the Guildhall, so let's do that. The Guildhall then, a Grade 1 listed structure that sits in the centre of Norwich, and it's done so since 1413. Basically, it's an elaborate town hall. In days of old, it would have been used for town meetings and such, but 600 years later, in 1923, it was still in use and was the centre of Norwich's government or city council. In 1938, the council would move to a newer, larger Art Deco-style building, but Guildhall would remain in use for official purposes up until 1980. Today, the building is open as a tourist or heritage attraction. What's interesting about the Michelin Guide is that not only will it tell you what to see and where to stay, it will also, in some cases, offer route suggestions. For example, for the journey we're taking today, the guide suggests that I head up Dove Street onto St John Madder Market and then up to Duke Street, where we'll be able to continue our journey out of Norwich. However, since 1923, a few changes have occurred in as much as the streets I mentioned are now pedestrianised, so back then I would have been going this way, but instead today I've got to go this way. Sorry, it's a little off-script rubbish bit, but Stranger's Coffee on Dove Street, definitely worth heading to. Fantastic. I best get back to the car and we crack on. We discover more changes to the road up by Norwich Airport. In the 1920s, we'd have been looking to do a right turn at this junction, but today there's a bit of a dual carriageway built on the top of said junction. It's the A1270 that opened quite recently in 2018. It was built to bypass Norwich, connecting the A47 to Fakenham Road. However, they didn't just build it for the fun of it. At the halfway point along this new road, plans are underway to construct several thousand new houses, and this new road has been built primarily to cater for the anticipated increase in traffic. For us, this all means we don't pick up the original route until just the other side of Newton St Faith, at which point we'll head up the A140 to get to the coast. This part of the A140 has mostly remained unchanged when compared to the 1920s, however there are a few road modifications that we can find along the way. For example, this lay-by. Today, just a lay-by, but according to the old maps, it was once part of the main road. The road would have followed this route, but it seems in later years they wanted to smooth out the corners, probably on safety grounds, resulting on the road being aligned and what was left over being turned into this lay-by. Another change to the A140 would come in 1980 with the construction of the Aylsham bypass. Today we're presented with a roundabout that allows us to join the bypass, but that's not in keeping with the 1920s road network, so instead we're going to continue down the old A140 through the middle of Aylsham. According to my guidebook, there's not really a lot to see in Aylsham, but it does suggest paying a visit to Blickling Hall, which is found just outside the town. This Jacobean stately home sits in an area of around 5,000 acres of parkland and is most noted for its extensive collection of old books and manuscripts found within its library, comprising some 14,000 items. I wonder if they've got any copies of the Michelin Guide. The structure was built in 1616 on the ruins of a building that for a time was under the ownership of the Boleyn family, who in 1507 would see the arrival of Anne, the future second wife of Henry VIII and future Queen of England. Unfortunately, it didn't really end so well for Anne. King Henry started to see someone else behind her back and then chopped her head off. Lad. Blickling Hall is also the name given to a steam locomotive that operates out of Aylsham Station. The station is the terminus for the Bure Valley Railway and it opened in 1990. If we look back to the 1920s, this railway used to be a full-size operation station, and it was known as the East Norfolk Railway. It was mostly a single track, and the railway through Aylsham would open in 1882, and it would operate right up until 1970, at which point it was closed permanently. That loss was eventually someone's gain, because the original trackbed and station area was used to build the narrow gauge railway, which was built as a tourist attraction, although sadly a little bit too late for inclusion in my 1923 guidebook. Leaving Aylsham behind, we head north along Cromer Road and through Ingworth before we need to make a left turn. Before the Aylsham bypass was built, we'd have just carried on straight through here. Either way, we'll now be following the road before picking up the A149 to head to our destination. As we arrive in the south of Cromer, the A149 crosses over a railway, and according to our old maps, there used to be a lot more railway in this area, including the now demolished Cromer High Station that was built in 1887. What I'm interested in is the now abandoned railway tunnel that the A149 crosses right over. It's far from the biggest or longest tunnel, but if Wikipedia is to be believed, it's the only standard gauge railway tunnel in the entire county of Norfolk, making it quite a rare thing, in this area anyway. Not mentioned on any of the old maps is the cart track you'll find hiding in the trees just round the corner from Cromer Tunnel. Established in the 1990s, Cart Track Cromer is a family-run business that offers everything you'd expect from a cart track. The track is an all-weather track that's 550 metres long. It was resurfaced in 2022, and speeds of up to around 45 miles per hour are very possible, if you've got big enough oranges. Cromer is famous for its crabs, but I'm not sure that's something to shout about. Heading into Cromer, and our guidebook suggests that one might like to investigate what it refers to as Lighthouse Cliff, but I can't find any mention of a lighthouse cliff on more modern maps. But there is a cliff and a lighthouse, so I think we're in the right place. Cromer Lighthouse was constructed in 1833 to replace the previous lighthouse that had sort of fallen into the sea. Cromer Lighthouse has a couple of interesting facts worth mentioning. In 1905, its lamps were converted to run on gas, and they simply plumbed the lighthouse into the town's main gas supply. It's interesting because it wasn't common practice for lighthouses to be powered via the town's utilities, and this was the only lighthouse of its type to do so. I mentioned that it replaced a lighthouse that had fallen into the sea. This happened due to land erosion. However, they learned their lesson, and when it came to constructing the new lighthouse, they sensibly built it 1.5 miles away from the sea. Wait, hang on a minute. The sea is just there. By my calculations, about 300 metres away. That's not quite 1.5 miles, is it? You've no doubt worked out what's happened. The land erosion hasn't stopped, and in 100 years, we've lost 1.5 miles of land. Shit. With that in mind, Cromer Lighthouse may not be here for that much longer. Neither will Cromer, from the sounds of it. Cromer is a popular tourist attraction to the US Air Force and RAF. Next up, we're going to go in search of some graffiti on a wall. Now, I know some of you get triggered when I say the word graffiti, but it's okay because this artist sells his graffiti for money. It's not the same. In the summer of 2021, graffiti artist Banksy went on what seems to be a holiday tour of 10 arguably failed seaside towns across Norfolk and Suffolk. One such failure to receive a visit was the town of Cromer, who had their seawall defaced with this disgusting graffiti that's now a tourist attraction. You're welcome, Cromer. Strangely, Banksy isn't mentioned in my 1923 guidebook, but it does mention Cromer Pier, so let's go see what the deal there is. There's been a pier at Cromer in one way or another for centuries. The story is quite repetitive. Build pier, storm destroys it. Build another pier, storm destroys it. Build a new pier, storm destroys it. Repeat this process for hundreds of years, up until 1902, when you finally build a pier out of slightly more durable materials. In 2013, the pier would close due to damage received during a storm. For fuck's sake. To be fair, it's lasted for over 100 years, and the pier is still open today, where you'll find the Pavilion Theatre that's been operating since 1905. It's also a base of operations for the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, or RNLI, a charity that save our asses every time we fuck about in the sea. It's run by volunteers. Who volunteers to go into the sea when it's at worst to save us? Well, they do, so fair play. Speaking of sea, you'll notice that there is some, which means we've run out of land, and that would be the end of today's Great British Road Journey. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That would be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting episode of Great British Road Journeys. Until then, take care, bye-bye.